Aylin, a midwife's apprentice, clutched her worn satchel close. Inside were bundles of dried herbs, her most prized possessions. She knew the healing properties of each leaf and root, a knowledge passed down from her grandmother. Though her own family was poor, Aylin possessed a wealth of compassion and a gentle touch, especially with children. Today, that gentle touch would lead her through the imposing gates of the Sultan's palace. She had been summoned to serve in the harem, a place of silks and secrets, a world away from her simple village life. The grandeur of the palace overwhelmed her. Towering marble columns reached towards the sky. Fountains splashed in courtyards, paved with polished stone. Eunuchs, their faces impassive, guided her through endless corridors. The air was thick with the scent of exotic perfumes and hushed whispers. Aylin felt a tremor of fear, but she held her head high. She was here to serve, to use her skills to help those in need. She was led to the secluded nursery, a room overflowing, with luxurious silks and toys, yet strangely silent. The silence was heavy, filled with an unspoken fear. The Sultan's infant heir lay in a gilded crib, his tiny face pale. Concubines hovered nearby, their eyes wide with apprehension. Yet none dared to touch the child. Whispers of a curse had spread through the harem. It was said the baby was afflicted, bringing misfortune to anyone who dared to hold him. Aylin's heart ached for the little one. He was so small, so vulnerable. She approached the crib, ignoring the fearful glances of the concubines. The baby stirred, a whimper escaping his lips. Aylin reached out a gentle hand and stroked his soft cheek. Sultan Qadir paced the shadowed corridor outside the nursery. His embroidered robes, heavy with gold thread, did little to ease the weight on his heart. His son, his heir, lay within, frail and vulnerable. The whispers of a curse gnawed at him. He dismissed them as superstition, yet the fear in the eyes of his concubines was real. They avoided the child, leaving him to cry alone in his gilded crib. Qadir longed to hold his son, to offer comfort, but the affairs of state pressed upon him. His kingdom faced threats from within and without, and he could not afford to show weakness, not even to his own child. He paused by the lattice screen that offered a glimpse into the nursery. His gaze fell upon a young woman he did not recognize. She was dressed in the simple garb of a servant, yet she moved with a grace that belied her lowly status. She stood by his son's crib, her hand resting gently on the baby's forehead. Qadir watched, unseen, as the woman leaned closer. She began to hum a soft melody, a lullaby he vaguely recognized. The tune tugged at something deep within his memory, a melody from his childhood, a song sung only by the women of the royal bloodline. How could this lowly servant know such a song? His suspicion deepened. Was she a spy planted by his enemies? He held his breath, listening intently as the woman's humming grew louder, transforming into a full-fledged lullaby. The baby, who had been whimpering moments before, now lay still, his eyes slowly closing. The woman continued to sing, her voice gentle and soothing. The lyrics spoke of ancient kings and queens, of courage and compassion, of a lineage stretching back centuries. Qadir's suspicion began to melt away, replaced by a strange sense of awe. He watched, captivated, as the servant girl, this unknown woman, cradled his son in her arms, humming the lullaby of his ancestors. He felt a pang of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Qadir summoned the servant girl. She stood before him in the grand audience chamber, her head bowed, her hands clasped nervously before her. He sat upon his throne, the symbol of his power, yet he felt a strange unease. He remembered the tenderness in her eyes as she cradled his son, the soothing melody of the lullaby. "You sang a song," Qadir said, his voice low and steady. "A song, only known to the royal family. Explain yourself." The girl trembled slightly, but her voice when she spoke was clear. "Your Majesty," she said, "my grandmother taught me that song. She told me stories of ancient kings and queens of a time long ago." Kadir studied her face. Her eyes, warm and brown, held no trace of deceit. He sensed a genuine innocence about her. "What is your name?" he asked. "Aylin, Your Majesty," she replied. He questioned her further about her family, her life in the village. She answered each question honestly, her voice soft yet firm. He learned of her grandmother, a village healer, who had taught her the ways of herbs and the art of midwifery. Kadir found himself drawn to her simple honesty, her gentle nature. He dismissed his initial suspicions. She was not a spy, but a simple girl, blessed with a kind heart and a soothing touch. "You have a gift, Aylin," he said finally. "A gift for healing, for comforting. My son needs such a gift." Aylin's eyes widened in surprise. "Your Majesty, I am but a humble servant," she said. "You are more than a servant, Aylin," Kadir replied, his gaze meeting hers. A flicker of understanding passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of something more than just ruler and subject. He allowed her to return to the nursery, but he found himself thinking of her often. He would steal glances at her through the lattice screen, watching as she cared for his son. He would find reasons to summon her, to ask about the baby's health, to listen to her soft voice as she spoke of herbs and remedies. Aylin too found herself drawn to the Sultan. His stern facade hid a vulnerability, a deep concern for his child. She felt a growing respect for him, a respect that was slowly blossoming into something more. Their conversations, though brief and formal, were filled with unspoken words, stolen glances, and a shared concern for the tiny life that lay between them. The seeds of attraction were sown, taking root in the fertile ground of the Sultan's heart and the gentle soul of the servant girl. The moon cast long shadows across the palace gardens, transforming the familiar pathways into a labyrinth of secrets. Aylin walked cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. The Sultan had requested her presence, a clandestine meeting far. From the prying eyes of the harem, she reached the designated spot, a secluded alcove hidden beneath a canopy of fragrant jasmine. Kadir was already there, his regal robes blending with the darkness. He gestured for her to approach. "The night air is cool," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "It is a welcome escape from the stifling walls of the palace." Aylin nodded, her gaze fixed on the ground. She was still unsure of his intentions, yet she felt a strange sense of calm in his presence. They began to walk, their footsteps barely disturbing the stillness of the night. They spoke of the baby, of his improving health, of Aylin's knowledge of herbs and remedies. Then the conversation shifted, turning to their own lives, their hopes and fears. Kadir spoke of the burdens of leadership, the constant threat of betrayal, the loneliness of power. Aylin listened intently, offering words of comfort and understanding. She spoke of her simple life in the village, her love for her family, her dreams of a future filled with healing and helping others. He listened, captivated by her gentle voice, her unwavering compassion. He learned of her grandmother's wisdom, the stories she had told of ancient kings and queens, of a lineage that echoed his own. He found himself revealing things he had never shared with anyone, his vulnerabilities, his fears for his son and his kingdom. Aylin, in turn, felt safe enough to share her own anxieties, the uncertainties of her new life in the harem, the whispers and glances of the other servants. As they talked, the moon climbed higher in the sky, bathing the gardens in its silvery light. The air was filled with the scent of jasmine and the soft murmur of their voices. They walked for what felt like hours, their conversation flowing effortlessly, a bridge built between two worlds, two souls separated by birth, yet united by a shared sense of compassion and a growing affection. They reached the alcove again, the place where their secret meeting had begun. Kadir paused, his gaze meeting Aylin's. "Thank you, Aylin," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "for your wisdom, your kindness, your company." Aylin's heart fluttered. She dared to meet his gaze, her own eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something more. She knew in that moment that their secret meetings in the moonlit gardens were more than just conversations. They were a sanctuary, a place where they could be themselves, free from the constraints of their respective roles, a place where a forbidden love was slowly beginning to bloom. The secret meetings in the moonlit gardens became a cherished ritual. Aylin would wait anxiously for the signal, a single white rose left on her doorstep by a sympathetic eunuch. Then she would slip away from the bustling harem, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and fear. Kadir would be waiting, his tall figure a comforting presence in the shadows. They would walk among the fragrant blossoms, their conversation, a tapestry woven with shared dreams and unspoken desires. He spoke of his hopes for his son, his desire to raise him to be a just and compassionate ruler. Aylin shared her own dreams of a world where healing and kindness were valued above all else. They found solace in each other's company, a refuge from the intrigues and pressures of palace life. Kadir's stern demeanor melted away in Aylin's presence. He would laugh freely, a sound she had never heard before, a sound that warmed her heart. He would confide in her, sharing his anxieties about the threats to his kingdom, the burden of his responsibilities. Aylin listened patiently, offering words of encouragement and support. She saw beyond his title, beyond the trappings of power, to the vulnerable man beneath. Aylin, too, shared her shyness in his presence. She spoke of her village life, her family, her grandmother's wisdom. She shared her fears about the harem, the whispers and suspicions that followed her like shadows. Kadir listened, his eyes filled with concern. He admired her courage, her resilience in the face of adversity. He saw her not as a lowly servant, but as a woman of strength and compassion. Their hands would brush accidentally as they walked, sending shivers down their spines. Their gazes would linger, their eyes speaking volumes unspoken. The silence between them was not empty, but filled with a growing understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the undeniable attraction that bloomed between them. One night, as the moon bathed the gardens in its silvery glow, Kadir stopped beneath a blossoming almond tree. He turned to Aylin, his eyes searching hers. "Aylin," he said, his voice husky with emotion. He hesitated, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. Aylin held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew, without him saying it, what he wanted to express. The feelings that had been simmering beneath the surface, the stolen glances, the whispered words, the shared silences, had blossomed into something undeniable, something forbidden, something beautiful. A budding love, fragile yet resilient, blooming in the heart of the Sultan and the soul of the servant girl. A love that defied the boundaries of their different worlds. A love that threatened to shatter the walls of the harem and change the course of their lives forever. The rose arrived as usual, a splash of white against the muted colors of Aylin's servant's garb. She tucked it into her sleeve, a secret smile touching her lips. Her meetings with Kadir had become the bright spot in her days, a beacon of warmth in the cold, impersonal world of the harem. But lately, a shadow had begun to fall across their clandestine moments of happiness. She had noticed a man watching her, a tall, thin man with sharp eyes and a thin, cruel smile. He was always lurking in the shadows, his presence like a chill wind on a warm day. She had learned his name was Zubair, the Sultan's vizier, his most trusted advisor. Aylin instinctively disliked him. There was a coldness in his gaze, a calculating glint in his eyes that made her uneasy. She sensed he was a dangerous man, a man who held secrets and wielded power like a weapon. Zubair watched Aylin with growing suspicion. He had seen the stolen glances between her and the Sultan, the secret meetings in the moonlit gardens. He knew the whispers that circulated among the harem servants, the rumors of a growing affection between the lowly servant girl and the mighty Sultan. Zubair's ambition was a bottomless pit. He craved power, influence, control. He saw the Sultan's young heir as a pawn in his game, a means to seize the regency and rule the kingdom from behind the throne. Aylin, with her growing influence over the Sultan, was a threat to his plans. He resented her closeness to Qadir, the trust she had earned, the affection that bloomed between them. He saw her as an obstacle, a pebble in his path to power, and he was determined to remove her. He began subtly, planting seeds of doubt in Qadir's mind. He would casually mention Aylin's low birth, the improbability of a servant girl knowing the royal lullaby. He hinted at the dangers of trusting those who came from outside the palace. Walls, those who might have ulterior motives. He spoke of loyalty and duty, reminding Qadir of the responsibilities of a ruler, the importance of choosing advisors wisely, of guarding against those who might seek to manipulate him. Qadir, burdened by the affairs of state, the constant threats to his kingdom, began to listen. He had always been a cautious man, wary of those who sought to gain his favor. Zubair's words, though subtle, began to take root in his mind, a tiny seed of suspicion that threatened to grow into a tree of distrust. The shadow of the vizier fell across the blossoming love between the Sultan and the servant girl, a dark omen of the conflict to come. Zubair's whispers, like drops of poison, began to spread through the harem. He spoke of Aylin's constant presence near the baby, her knowledge of herbs and remedies. He hinted that she might be using her skills for nefarious purposes, slowly poisoning the infant heir to gain favor with the Sultan. He reminded everyone of the rumors of a curse, suggesting that Aylin might be the source of the child's continued frailty. The concubines, already fearful and superstitious, readily accepted Zubair's insinuations. They began to avoid Aylin, their whispers following her like shadows. They watched her every move, their eyes filled with suspicion and fear. Zubair's poison reached the Sultan's ears. He tried to dismiss it as idle gossip, the machinations of a jealous courtier. He reminded himself of Aylin's gentle nature, her genuine concern for his son. Yet the seed of doubt planted by Zubair had begun to sprout. He found himself watching Aylin more closely, questioning her motives, searching for any sign of deceit. He recalled the lullaby, the song of his ancestors, and wondered again how a simple servant girl could know such a melody. Qadir began to distance himself from Aylin. He no longer sought her out for conversations, no longer stole glances at her through the lattice screen. He avoided the nursery, unwilling to face the questions that gnawed at him. He found himself increasingly relying on Zubair's counsel, seeking solace in the vizier's assurances of loyalty and support. Aylin felt the shift in Qadir's demeanor. His warmth had been replaced by a coldness, his gaze by suspicion. She sensed the whispers that followed her, the accusing glances of the concubines. She knew instinctively that Zubair was behind it, that he was poisoning her relationship with the Sultan. She tried to speak to Qadir, to explain, to defend herself against the accusations, but he would not listen. He turned away from her, his face a mask of indifference. Aylin felt a pang of despair. She was alone in the harem, surrounded by enemies. Her only ally, the Sultan, now seemingly turned against her. The walls of the palace, once a symbol of hope and opportunity, now felt like a prison. The whispers, like venomous snakes, coiled around her, tightening their grip, threatening to crush her spirit. Qadir, his mind clouded by Zubair's poison, finally succumbed to his doubts. He ordered Aylin confined to her quarters, a small, sparsely furnished room, far from the opulence of the nursery. He told himself it was for her own protection, that the whispers and accusations were becoming too dangerous. But deep down he knew he was also protecting himself, shielding himself from the pain of betrayal, the possibility that the woman he had grown to care for might be deceiving him. The separation was a torment for both of them. Kadir paced the halls of the palace, his heart heavy with longing. He missed Aylin's gentle presence, her soothing voice, the warmth of her gaze. He missed their conversations in the moonlit gardens, the shared silences, the unspoken understanding that had blossomed between them. He tried to convince himself that he had done the right thing, that he was protecting his son, his kingdom. But the emptiness in his heart told a different story. Aylin sat alone in her small room, the silence broken only by the occasional sobs that escaped her lips. The walls seemed to close in on her, suffocating her with their oppressive stillness. She longed to see Kadir, to explain, to plead her innocence, but she knew it was futile. Zubair's poison had taken hold, and she was powerless to fight it. She worried about the baby, the tiny life she had cared for with such devotion. She feared Zubair's influence, the darkness that seemed to emanate from the vizier. She felt a growing sense of dread, a premonition that something terrible was about to happen. Days turned into nights, each one longer and more agonizing than the last. Aylin's hope began to dwindle, replaced by a deep despair. She felt abandoned, betrayed, lost in a world of whispers and shadows. She clutched the single white rose Kadir had given her, its petals now dried and brittle, a poignant reminder of a love that seemed doomed to wither and die. She closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face, her heart aching with a pain so profound she thought it might shatter her into a million pieces. One of the Sultan's concubines, a young woman named Jamila, watched the unfolding events with growing unease. She had witnessed Zubair's subtle manipulations, the way he poisoned the Sultan's mind against Aylin. Jamila had no love for the vizier. She had seen the cruelty in his eyes, the ambition that burned within him. She sensed he was a dangerous man, a man who would stop at nothing to achieve his goals. She had also observed Aylin, her gentle nature, her genuine affection for the baby. She did not believe the rumors, the whispers of poison and curses. She knew in her heart that Aylin was innocent. One evening, Jamila found an opportunity to approach Aylin's quarters. The guards, influenced by Zubair, were lax in their duties, their attention easily diverted. Jamila slipped a note under Aylin's door, a simple message requesting a secret meeting. Later that night, under the cover of darkness, Aylin met Jamila in a secluded corner of the Harem gardens. They spoke in hushed whispers, their words barely audible above the gentle rustling of the leaves. Aylin poured out her heart to Jamila, her fears, her despair, her unwavering belief in her own innocence. Jamila listened patiently, her eyes filled with compassion. "I believe you, Aylin," she said softly. "I have seen the vizier's treachery. He is a dangerous man, and he will not stop until he has destroyed you." Aylin's eyes widened in surprise. "But why?" she whispered. "Why would he want to harm me?" Jamila explained Zubair's ambition, his desire for power, his plan to use the baby as a pawn in his game. She told Aylin of the rumors she had overheard, the whispers of Zubair's plot to seize the regency. Aylin listened, her heart pounding with fear. She realized the true extent of the danger she was in, the danger that threatened not only her own life, but also the life of the Sultan's heir. "We must stop him," Aylin said, her voice trembling with determination. Jamila nodded. "We will," she replied. Together. They formed a secret alliance, two women from different worlds, united by their shared desire to protect the innocent, to expose the truth. They began to gather evidence, small pieces of information, overheard conversations, suspicious glances. They worked in secrecy, their movements carefully planned, their communication limited to whispered words and hidden notes. They knew the risks they were taking, the danger they faced if discovered. But they were determined to fight, to expose Zubair's treachery and save the baby, even if it meant risking their own lives. The intrigue within the harem deepened. A silent battle waged in the shadows, a battle between good and evil, between loyalty and betrayal. Zubair's plan was as intricate and poisonous as the herbs he secretly used. He intended to allow the slow-acting toxin he'd been administering to the baby to gradually weaken the child, making him appear increasingly frail and cursed. As the heir's health declined, Zubair would fan the flames of fear and superstition within the harem, solidifying the belief that the child was indeed afflicted. He would then present himself as the only one capable of protecting the kingdom from the misfortune brought on by the cursed heir. He planned to convince the Sultan that the only way to save the kingdom was to isolate the child completely, placing him under Zubair's sole guardianship. With the heir under his control, Zubair would effectively become the regent, ruling the kingdom in the Sultan's name. He would consolidate his power, eliminating any rivals, silencing any dissent. He would amass wealth and influence, becoming the true power behind the throne. He envisioned himself as the puppet master, pulling the strings of the kingdom, manipulating the Sultan and controlling the future of the empire. He cared nothing for the child, seeing him only as a means to an end. In his twisted mind, the baby's suffering was a small price to pay for the power he craved. He had even begun to consider a more drastic measure, a final solution to ensure his complete control. If the child continued to linger, if his slow decline did not progress as planned, Zubair would arrange a tragic accident, a seemingly unavoidable misfortune that would end the heir's life and solidify his own position as the savior of the kingdom. He believed he was untouchable, his plan foolproof. He had carefully cultivated his image as a loyal advisor, a trusted confidant. He had manipulated the Sultan, poisoned his mind against Aylin, and silenced any potential opposition within the harem. He believed he had foreseen every contingency, eliminated every threat. He was wrong. He had not accounted for the courage of two women, their unwavering determination to expose the truth, to protect the innocent, to thwart his evil. In plan, he had underestimated the power of loyalty, the strength of love, the resilience of the human spirit. His web of deceit, spun so carefully, was about to unravel thread by thread. Aylin paced her small room, her mind racing. Jamila's words echoed in her ears, painting a chilling picture of Zubair's treachery. She knew she had to act, to find proof of his plot, to save the baby and clear her own name. An idea began to form, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. She remembered her grandmother's teachings, the wisdom passed down through generations of healers. She remembered the subtle signs of illness, the telltale symptoms of poisoning. She had noticed a slight tremor in the baby's hands, a subtle change in the color of his skin. She had dismissed it as the lingering effects of the supposed curse. But now, with Jamila's revelations, a terrifying possibility arose. Could the baby be slowly poisoned? Could Zubair be responsible? Determined to find answers, Aylin sought a way to access the nursery. She knew it was heavily guarded, her own movements restricted, but desperation gave her courage. She confided in Jamila, sharing her suspicions, her plan to examine the baby's food. Jamila, ever resourceful, found a way. She bribed a sympathetic kitchen maid, a young girl eager to escape the vizier's oppressive gaze. The maid agreed to smuggle a small sample of the baby's food to Aylin. Late that night, under the cover of darkness, Aylin received the small vial. Her heart pounded with anticipation and fear. She carefully examined the contents, using the simple tools she had managed to conceal in her room. She added a drop of a special tincture, a mixture of herbs her grandmother had taught her to prepare, a mixture that reacted to certain toxins. The liquid in the vial changed color, a subtle shift from pale yellow to a faint green. Aylin's breath caught in her throat. Her suspicions were confirmed. The baby's food was poisoned, laced with a slow-acting toxin, a poison designed to weaken the child gradually, mimicking the symptoms of a curse. The curse was not a supernatural affliction, but a deliberate act of sabotage, and Zubair, she knew with chilling certainty, was the one responsible. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place, forming a terrifying picture. Zubair's whispers, his subtle manipulations, his growing influence over the Sultan, it all pointed to a single, horrifying conclusion. He was using the baby, the innocent heir, as a pawn in his power grab. He was slowly poisoning the child to seize control of the kingdom. The truth, like a sharp blade, cut through the darkness, revealing the full extent of Zubair's evil. Aylin knew she had to act quickly. She had to find a way to expose Zubair, to save the baby, to warn the Sultan before it was too late. Qadir found himself increasingly torn. Zubair's whispers had woven a web of doubt around him, trapping him in a maze of suspicion and fear. He struggled to reconcile the image of Aylin, the gentle healer who had soothed his son with the royal lullaby, with the accusations of poisoning and treachery. He longed to believe in her innocence, to trust the warmth he had felt in her presence, the genuine concern he had seen in her eyes. Yet Zubair's words, like a persistent drumbeat, echoed in his mind, reminding him of the dangers of trusting outsiders, the potential for betrayal. He paced the halls of the palace, his embroidered robes a heavy burden, the weight of his crown pressing down on him. He felt the eyes of his courtiers upon him, their whispers following him like shadows. He was the Sultan, the ruler of a vast kingdom. Yet he felt powerless, caught in a web of intrigue he could not unravel. Jamila, watching Qadir's torment, knew she had to act. She had gathered fragments of evidence, overheard conversations, suspicious glances exchanged between Zubair and his allies. She knew she risked her own safety by approaching the Sultan, but she could no longer stand idly by while Zubair poisoned his mind and endangered the life of his heir. She requested an audience with Qadir, a bold move that surprised even the most seasoned courtiers. Qadir, weary and troubled, granted her request. Jamila stood before him, her head bowed, her hands clasped nervously before her. She spoke carefully, choosing her words with precision, revealing only fragments of what she knew, hints of Zubair's plot, whispers of his ambition. She told Qadir of the conversations she had overheard, the veiled threats, the suspicious meetings. She spoke of Zubair's growing influence within the harem, his control over the guards, his manipulation of the concubines. She did not mention Aylin, knowing that Qadir's suspicion of her was still too strong. She simply presented the facts, letting them speak for themselves, hoping they would plant a seed of doubt in Qadir's mind, a seed that would grow into a realization of Zubair's treachery. Qadir listened intently, his gaze fixed on Jamila. Her words, though carefully chosen, resonated with the truth he had been trying to ignore. He recalled Zubair's subtle insinuations, the way he had slowly poisoned his mind against Aylin. He remembered the fear in Jamila's eyes, the sincerity in her voice. He began to question his own judgment, the trust he had placed in his vizier. A flicker of doubt, a tiny spark of suspicion ignited within him, challenging the web of deceit that Zubair had so carefully woven. He dismissed Jamila, thanking her for her loyalty, his mind churning with the implications of what she had revealed. He knew he had to investigate, to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. He was the Sultan, the protector of his kingdom, the guardian of his heir. He could no longer allow himself to be manipulated, to be blinded by the whispers of a treacherous advisor. He had a duty to his people, to his son, to himself. He had to find the truth, even if it meant confronting the darkness that lurked. Within the walls of his own palace, Aylin, weakened by confinement and worry, continued to tend to the baby whenever she could. A sympathetic eunuch sometimes allowed her brief access to the nursery, his conscience troubled by the injustice he witnessed. One afternoon, as Aylin held the infant heir, she noticed a small, intricately carved amulet hidden within the folds of his swaddling cloth. She gently lifted the amulet, her fingers tracing its delicate patterns. It was made of gold, inlaid with precious stones, and depicted a mythical griffin, the ancient symbol of the royal family. A jolt of recognition ran through her. She had seen this amulet before, or at least one very much like it. Her grandmother had owned a similar piece, a simple silver replica, worn close to her heart. She remembered the stories her grandmother had told, tales of a distant ancestor, a princess who had married a commoner and vanished from the royal court, taking with her only a small silver amulet, a memento of her noble lineage. The stories had always seemed like fairy tales, a way to escape the drudgery of their simple life. But now, as Aylin held the golden amulet in her hand, a chilling realization dawned upon her. The stories were true. She was a descendant of that long-lost princess, a distant relative of the Sultan, a member of the royal bloodline. The silver amulet her grandmother had treasured, a seemingly worthless trinket, was in fact a symbol of their hidden heritage. This revelation explained the lullaby, the ancient melody known only to the royal family. It was not a coincidence, but a legacy, a song passed down through generations, a whisper of their royal blood. But this revelation also increased the danger she faced. Zubair's ambition, his desire for power, would not tolerate a potential rival to the throne, even a distant one. Her royal lineage, once a hidden secret, now made her a target, a threat to his carefully laid plans. Meanwhile, the eunuch who had witnessed Aylin's discovery, overcome with guilt and fear of Zubair's wrath, confided in Qadir. He told the Sultan of the amulet, of its significance, of Aylin's reaction. Qadir listened, his mind reeling. The pieces of the puzzle, scattered and confusing, began to fall into place. The lullaby, Aylin's gentle nature, her unwavering concern for his son, it all made sense now. She was not a lowly servant girl, but a descendant of royalty, a woman of noble blood. And Zubair, he realized with a sickening certainty, had been manipulating him, poisoning his mind against the very person who posed the greatest threat to his ambitions. Qadir's heart ached with regret. He had doubted Aylin, pushed her away, confined her to her quarters. He had allowed Zubair's poison to cloud his judgment, to blind him to the truth. He knew he had to act, to rectify his mistake, to protect Aylin, to expose Zubair's treachery. The amulet, a symbol of Aylin's royal lineage, had become a catalyst, a turning point in the intricate dance of palace intrigue. It had revealed a hidden truth, a secret heritage, and in doing so, it had set in motion a chain of events that would change the course of their lives forever. Qadir summoned Zubair to his private chambers, his voice cold and hard. The vizier entered, his usual obsequious smile plastered on his face, but a flicker of unease betrayed his true feelings. He sensed the shift in the Sultan's demeanor, the coldness in his gaze. He knew, instinctively, that something had changed. Zubair, Qadir began, his voice low and menacing, I have learned much in the past few days. Things you have conveniently omitted from your counsel. Zubair's smile faltered. He attempted to speak, to offer excuses, but Qadir silenced him with a wave of his hand. "The amulet," Qadir said, holding up the golden griffin, "tells a story. You have tried to conceal a story of royal blood, of a hidden heritage." Zubair's face paled. He knew his carefully constructed lies were crumbling. He tried to regain his composure, to weave another layer of deceit, but Qadir's gaze, sharp and unwavering, pierced through his facade. "You have poisoned my mind against Aylin," Qadir continued, his voice rising in anger. "You have accused her of treachery, of poisoning my son, when in truth you are the one who has betrayed me." Zubair's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. He knew he was trapped, his web of deceit unraveling around him. "Confess, Zubair," Qadir demanded, his voice like thunder. "Confess your crimes, and perhaps I will show you mercy." Zubair, seeing no other option, finally broke. He confessed his ambition, his desire for power, his plan to use the baby to seize control of the kingdom. He admitted to poisoning the child's food, to spreading rumors of a curse, to manipulating the Sultan's trust. He confessed everything, his words pouring out in a torrent of guilt and fear. As Zubair confessed, a hidden door behind the tapestries swung open, and two guards entered, their swords drawn. They had been listening, unseen, on Qadir's orders, witnesses to the vizier's treachery. Zubair, seeing the guards, lunged towards Qadir, a dagger flashing in his hand. He intended to silence the Sultan, to eliminate the only witness to his crimes. But Qadir, anticipating his move, was quicker. He dodged the attack, seizing Zubair's wrist with an iron grip. A struggle ensued, brief but violent. The guards intervened, disarming Zubair and pinning him to the ground. Qadir stood over him, his face a mask of fury and disgust. "You have betrayed my trust, Zubair," he said, his voice cold and hard. "You have endangered my son, my kingdom. You will pay the price for your treachery." Zubair, defeated and trembling, offered no resistance. He knew his game was over, his ambition turned to ashes. The truth, like a blinding light, had exposed his darkness, revealing the full extent of his evil. The confrontation had ended, the revelation complete. The vizier's plot had been uncovered, his treachery exposed. Justice, swift and merciless, would soon be served. Aylin, freed from her confinement, rushed to the nursery. Her heart pounded with fear and determination. She knew the baby was weak, poisoned by Zubair's slow-acting toxin. She had to act quickly, to use her knowledge of herbs and remedies to save the child's life. She examined the baby, his tiny body frail and listless. She recognized the symptoms, the subtle signs of the poison. She immediately began to prepare an antidote, a mixture of rare herbs she had brought with her from the village. She worked. Quickly, her hands moving with practiced skill, her mind focused on the task at hand. She administered the antidote, drop by drop, watching anxiously for any sign of improvement. Slowly, gradually, the baby began to respond. His breathing became more regular, his color returned. A faint cry escaped his lips, a sound that filled Aylin's heart with relief and gratitude. Qadir, his mind reeling from Zubair's confession, arrived at the nursery. He saw Aylin cradling his son, the baby's small hand gripping her finger. He saw the relief in her eyes, the exhaustion etched on her face. He knew, without a word being spoken, that she had saved his son's life. He approached her slowly, his heart filled with a mixture of gratitude and shame. He knelt beside her, his gaze meeting hers. "Aylin," he said, his voice thick with emotion, I was wrong to doubt you. I was blind, manipulated by a treacherous advisor." Aylin looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. "Your Majesty," she whispered, "all that matters is that your son is safe." Qadir took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not a lowly servant girl, but a woman of courage, compassion, and noble blood. He then summoned his guards, and with Aelin at his side, walked into the grand audience chamber. He stood before his assembled court, his voice ringing with authority. He publicly acknowledged Aelin's royal lineage, her connection to the ancient bloodline. He recounted Zubair's treachery, his plot to poison the air and seize control of the kingdom. He exposed Zubair's lies, his manipulations, his crimes against the throne. The court listened in stunned silence, their whispers replaced by gasps of shock and disbelief. They had been deceived, manipulated by a man they had trusted. Qadir then banished Zubair from the kingdom, stripping him of his title, his wealth, and his power. He was sent away in disgrace, a pariah, his ambition turned to dust. Justice had been served. The days that followed were filled with celebration and renewal. The shadow of Zubair's treachery had lifted, replaced by the bright promise of a new era. Qadir, his heart filled with gratitude and love, publicly declared his intention to marry Aelin. He announced to the court that she, a descendant of royalty, a woman of courage and compassion, would become his sultana. The announcement was met with cheers and applause. The court, once filled with whispers and suspicion, now buzzed with excitement and anticipation. They had witnessed Aelin's bravery, her unwavering loyalty, her unwavering love for the infant heir. They welcomed her as their new sultana, their hearts filled with hope for a brighter future. The wedding was a grand affair, a celebration of love and unity. Aelin, dressed in a gown of shimmering silk, her warm brown eyes shining with happiness, stood beside Qadir. He gazed at her with adoration, his heart overflowing with love. They exchanged vows, their words echoing through the grand hall, a testament to their enduring bond. Together, Qadir and Aelin ruled the kingdom with wisdom and compassion. They raised their son, now healthy and strong, surrounded by love and laughter. The whispers of a curse faded away, replaced by tales of the Sultana's kindness, her healing touch, her unwavering devotion to her family and her people. The palace gardens, once a place of secret meetings and hidden dangers, became a sanctuary for their family, a place where they could walk hand in hand, their laughter mingling with the songs of birds and the gentle rustling of leaves. Aelin continued to use her knowledge of herbs and remedies to heal the sick and comfort the afflicted. She established a school for midwives, sharing her skills with other women, empowering them to care for their communities. Qadir, guided by Aelin's wisdom and compassion, became a just and beloved ruler. He strengthened the kingdom, forging alliances with neighboring lands, ensuring peace and prosperity for his people. They ruled together, side by side, their love a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of kindness, courage, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. The palace, once a place of intrigue and shadows, was now filled with light and laughter, a testament to the love that had blossomed between a sultan and a servant girl, a love that had changed the course of their lives and the destiny of their kingdom.